be educated, entertained, and really just not lose our minds during this crisis. So I'm Frank Cullen. I'm Vice President of U.S. Policy at the Global Innovation Policy Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We care about these issues because we know the important role the innovative and creative industries play in our economy and also improving people's lives. 45 million domestic jobs are created by IP-intensive industries. Over 38% of our GDP and well over half of our trade come from the innovative and creative industry sectors. And as I said before, we know that innovation is going to be the key to getting us through this crisis and returning us to a normal workplace. I'd like to also recognize and thank Representative Swalwell for taking a moment from his busy schedule to join us to talk about these important issues. You know, it would be remiss if I did not thank the representative. Congressman, you've been a leader, and your colleagues in Congress as well, in terms of providing relief to American workers, focusing attention on how we can get through this pandemic and find cures, and supporting a lot of the research and development that's going to go into really getting past this crisis. So I want to thank you for your hard work on behalf of your constituents. I also want to thank our colleagues at the Pleasanton Chamber of Commerce. The Pleasanton Chamber of Commerce is widely recognized as a business leader. And of course, Pleasanton is a premier community in which to live, work, and do business. The business climate is a key driver.
Oh, well, it's weird. Maybe Eric. So it looks like Eric had signed on.
Oh,
I'm going
to mute her. Hold on. Yeah.
Thank you. So the business climate is a key driver of the community's success.
And then, like, I don't know what's happening, but like it looks like.
There we go.
And the Pleasanton businesses generate roughly 55% of the local tax base and collectively act as a community's economic engine. The Pleasanton Chamber relies on Pleasanton 2025, a community vision, as its local public policy agenda, committing volunteer and staff time to work towards its fulfillment as a catalyst, convener, and champion for all things Pleasanton. In short, their strong local economy and extraordinary quality of life happen by design, not by accident. And working together, they cause great things to happen. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Van Dorn, President and CEO of the Pleasanton Chamber of Commerce. And Steve will have the honor of introducing the Congressman. Steve was named President and CEO in 2018, following a successful career in the hospitality industry and leadership roles with the California State Chamber of Commerce and other California chambers. He leads a very talented team and has implemented a visionary agenda to advance the interests of the Pleasanton business community and improve the lives for all residents. Steve, thank you so much for the partnership, and it's my pleasure to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Frank, and welcome to the Congressman and all of our panelists. I'm glad you joined us, Rick. I'm glad you found the link, and we're so pleased to be partnering with the U.S. Chamber. Frank, I want to get a copy of that audio of my introduction. That was very nice, so I appreciate that. As I mentioned, we're just really pleased to partner with the U.S. Chamber in hosting today's webinar, really highlighting what sets the East Bay and the Tri-Valley area apart, in our opinion. And we're working with our member companies to hopefully beat COVID-19, right? The Tri-Valley is, in our opinion, fast becoming the center for life science technology companies in the Bay Area, with many located right here in Pleasanton. We believe Pleasanton and the Tri-Valley are positioned to become the largest life science hub in the Bay Area. And we're pleased to be a part of that. So I'd like to now introduce our featured speaker, the Congressman from the 15th District of California, Eric Swalwell. Congressman Swalwell is what I call a true local boy to the Tri-Valley. He grew up and has lived in Dublin, California, where I also live, for many years, attending Dublin Public Schools in his youth. He served on Dublin's Planning Commission, was elected a city council member, and then was elected to U.S. Congress in 2012. And based on the recent election numbers, we are pleased to see he will be confirmed to serve his 5th term of office. Congressman Swalwell has been a strong supporter of the business community and is always willing to engage on issues that may impact the business community. Most recently, he has been very supportive of the stimulus bills that have helped our business community significantly make it through this pandemic. And we remain hopeful, crossing my fingers, we get another bill approved real soon, because many of our businesses are still hurting. And we also hope it includes 501c6 organizations, such as our chambers of commerce. So Congressman, before I turn it over to Frank to moderate our panel discussion, we would welcome hearing any comments you'd like to share at the beginning of our program. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Frank, for inviting me. And I see my friend, Rick Shumway, who has really just stepped up locally at Stanford Valley Care to meet the needs that we have locally. You're going to hear some noise in the background here. I'm working from home. We have a second floor shower that is leaking to the first floor. And so there's some construction going on to take care of that. That is much quieter than the 2-year-old and the 3-year-old who are going to be running in and out when nap time is over very soon. But I'm happy to do this. And also, I just want to say, Frank, and this is not your department, but it was very heartening that this last election cycle, the Chamber of Commerce, for the first time in a long time, supported Democrats running for Congress. I think most of us want to see ourselves, as pro-business legislators who understand the role that businesses play in our communities. And as a former arts commissioner and planning commissioner and city council member, I know how important it is that our local businesses thrive. And so I look forward to working with the chamber, in the new Congress, with primarily getting the country back open, meaning that every business has its doors open, that employees are able to come back into the workforce. In Pleasanton, to speak hyper locally, the agility that the city has shown under this crisis has been really impressive. Our Main Street downtown every weekend for many weekends, we opened up the Main Street, closed it to cars driving through, and the restaurants were able to kind of expand their footprint, just to try and stay open. And that kind of agility is going to be needed, in the coming months as we try and crush this virus. But in Congress, we have to provide relief in direct support to businesses through the Paycheck Protection Plan, credits for any sanitation or sanitizing that takes place, on site. Also, employee retention credits as well that are going to be needed up to 80%. That's what we support in the House. So relief as far as direct payments to businesses in the form of capital, but also recovery. So recovery is different than relief, because recovery is what can you build and who can you put to work to build it. And there's such a great infrastructure need in this country that I really hope we have bipartisan support to address and meet that infrastructure need going forward. But I look forward to this panel discussion, and I think we all agree, if we can, shut down the virus, we can fully reopen America as quickly as possible.
Well, Congressman, thank you for those insightful comments, and also for your great work and leadership in Congress. And I couldn't appreciate more your comments about the Chamber's approach to supporting bipartisan members of Congress who really are friends to business and really are problem solvers, as opposed to those folks who are really just interested in the partisan infighting we've seen over the last several years from some sectors within our political spectrum. So thank you for that. We commit to working with you and other leaders in Congress going forward. We're very fortunate to be joined today by some really exceptional leaders in the private sector who will share some thoughts along with the Congressman about the role industry is playing in getting us through this crisis. I'd like to introduce Jamie Freedman, Senior Vice President, U.S. Medical Affairs for Genentech, Rick Shumway, President and CEO, Stanford Healthcare and Valley Care, and Dr. Thomas Seck, Senior Vice President, Medicine and Regulatory Affairs at Boehringer Ingelheim. I think we'll start off by just asking a few questions of the panelists and the Congressman, and then maybe we can allow that to sort of morph into a little bit of a back and forth. But first, I want to mention, the Chamber has looked at this issue very closely and recognizes, as I said earlier, the important role innovation is going to play in terms of getting us to a vaccine and new treatments. it's interesting to note that we have a new interactive map as part of what we call our Discover and Deliver campaign that shows the well over 600 clinical trials and research projects taking place all across the country and literally in every state and probably most congressional districts. So with that, Congressman Swalwell, as I mentioned before, our interactive map breaks down where these clinical trials are taking place right down to congressional districts. And it shows there are currently over 300 clinical trials for COVID-19 related therapeutics and vaccines taking place across California alone, with 3 taking place in your very own congressional district. Could you share with us why you believe it's important to run these cutting edge clinical trials in your district and the benefits these trials are bringing not only to COVID-19 patients, but also to your local economy?
Yeah, and Frank, as you mentioned, we have BI in our district. We have Roche as a major facility in our district. Also, Boston Scientific. There's so many in our district who are in the innovation economy. And first and foremost, I think we want to have, until there's a vaccine, therapeutics that can, reduce the hospital stays, and of course, prevent death, and that comes out of these clinical trials. But ultimately, to have a vaccine that is accepted by the public and that has the confidence that the public needs to have in it is going to require, clinical trials that are proven, vetted, and can meet and also distribute in an equitable way as quickly as possible. And so, supporting those. In our district, again, we're innovation minded. It's an educated and diverse district, which is also important when you're doing clinical trials, is you want to have, ethnic diversity in the trials in case, certain populations are more susceptible to issues, around a vaccine. And we have, in my congressional district, it is, I believe, the 3rd or 4th most diverse district in America. And so, we benefit from a population that really is able to contribute to those trials.
Well, Congressman, thank you for touching on that important aspect of these issues. The Chamber recently launched an Equality of Opportunity initiative to help close race-based opportunity gaps. And that's not only in industry, but also to your very point about how we can ensure more people are engaged in the clinical trials from every segment of the community and representing our entire population. And also, really looking at how we can close the gap that has persisted when it comes to healthcare, as we have seen minorities being disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus. You've touched a little bit on how you've seen this play out in the district, and you've been a leader on trying to highlight these issues in Congress. What else do you think the business community and government should be doing to work together to help close this gap?
Yeah, we can work in Congress as it relates to diversity, but it's the work that takes place in the boardroom, and who's on the board, who's at the table when decisions are made. That I would really lead. That's where the leadership has to come from our local businesses. And Steve, I forgot Thermo Fisher, also a giant footprint in Pleasanton. And so really, I think coming from the boardroom and showing leadership there. In Congress, I really believe we can continue to invest federally in access to skills. And when you talk to economic leaders in this country about, why the skills gap, why the income inequality, why are African Americans, taking on more student loan debt and making less than, white Americans. So much of it starts early on that, their communities in many places have fewer resources when it comes to schools and job training. And access to childcare. And that's where I think in Congress we can really fund those gaps and provide the opportunity that is needed.
Well, thank you for that. And the Chamber looks forward to continuing to work on those issues and also looking to work with leaders such as you to continue this discussion and see what role industry and business can play to really try to close those gaps and address these very serious issues. Mr. Freedman, the Congressman just mentioned the ways that the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the race-based gaps in access to healthcare. Now, I know this is an issue you are passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit about Genentech's work to further health equality?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Frank, for that question. And really honored to be at this important Chamber of Commerce session. before I answer your question directly, I just want to mention that, as Congressman Swalwell said, in Pleasanton, Roche Diagnostics has a branch called Roche Molecular Diagnostics, and really proud that we entered very early with multiple diagnostic tests. There was a COVID PCR test that we have, and then there's an antibody-based test. And for the upcoming flu season, we're actually going to have a combination of a COVID flu A and B test, which is going to be very important, since sometimes discriminating patients who have flu versus COVID-19 or even both is very difficult. So far, we've distributed 42.5 million tests throughout the US for US citizens. So in response to your question, we've made a major commitment to finding therapeutics for COVID-19 at Roche and Genentech. We've repurposed multiple drugs. One of them is Actemra, which has been on the market for about 10 years for rheumatoid arthritis. It's an anti-inflammatory. So it absolutely made a lot of sense to evaluate that in patients hospitalized with COVID-19 pneumonia, where we knew cytokines are elevated like interleukin-6. And what we found early on is we generated some real world evidence that there was a racial disparity signal in patients who were hospitalized with COVID-19 pneumonia. We saw a disproportionate number of African Americans, and we acted on that extremely quickly. So we took our product, Actemra, and designed a randomized placebo-controlled trial. And instead of going to the traditional, tried and trusted sites that are large academic centers, we chose to go to community-based hospitals that were underserved around the US, starting in New York, where the pandemic was at its peak. And those hospitals were enriched with patients who were African American, Hispanic, Latino, and other minority populations. And we actually enrolled the trial amazingly quickly. I mean, we had to put all our resources on it because these trials are notoriously difficult to enroll, these type of trials, and our most talented employees. And we enrolled approximately 400 patients. And we were really proud that at the end of the trial, we actually had enrolled about 85% minorities. 55% were Hispanic Latinx. Another 15% were African American, and surprisingly, 15% were Native American, primarily out of New Mexico. And we even expanded the trial actually with the same spirit of the original trial to go to underserved hospitals in South America and Africa. And really proud that Kenya, for the first time, participated in a global clinical trial at Roche. And we enrolled patients from those countries as well. We just found out actually recently that the trial ended up being positive for the primary endpoint in terms of reducing the risk of progressing to mechanical ventilation or death by 44%. We anticipate publishing it in a high-profile journal very shortly. But this whole effort really launched us ahead in the whole inclusive research space. And so now we're starting a number of other trials in this area that we can talk about later.
Well, thank you for that. That's both inspiring work and encouraging that we're headed in the direction, I think, quite reasonably soon to find some more good news on the vaccine and treatment front. Mr. Shumway, Stanford Valley Care launched its first ever clinical trial during the global pandemic, which is really an impressive milestone for your hospital. Can you tell us why you believe it's important to run these cutting edge clinical trials in your community and your hospital, and the benefits these trials bring to COVID-19 patients specifically?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel today and for the conversation that's already taking place. These are obviously the things that are top of mind for all of us, obviously in the business community, certainly in the healthcare community and the community at large. So I'm glad we're talking about them. This has been really kind of a landmark year in so many ways for our community and for our organization here at Stanford Valley Care. As many of you know, we were able to participate in the NIH trials around remdesivir, which was really one of the first and one of the primary treatment protocols for hospitalized patients with COVID-19. And so what essentially this did by bringing this trial to the Tri-Valley is it put us in the driver's seat, or at least in one of the front seats, for the actual development of an effective treatment for what is ultimately a pressing need within our community, but really across the globe. So all of a sudden, Pleasanton, Livermore, Dublin, Danville, San Ramon, and elsewhere became really critical in the development of this technology and this therapeutic intervention. And what it ultimately allowed was for patients in our community to have access to literal bleeding edge intervention that otherwise would not have been available to them outside of Palo Alto and San Francisco. We are the only place in the region that is able to provide those types of services and allow our patients to have access to that kind of therapeutics. What else it has done, though, is it's opened the door for us to build a legitimate, long-lasting, strong clinical trials infrastructure within our organization and within our community. That's relevant as it relates to COVID, certainly. We're already looking at trials around public health surveillance studies that are happening across the Stanford infrastructure that will allow us to intervene differently around the incidence and management of COVID across communities. Certainly, the additional vaccination trials that are ongoing will continue to be opportunities for us in our community. We are working with Regeneron, which is the company that manages the antibody cocktail that got a lot of press when the president received that over the course of the last couple of months. And so those types of things will be available to our community. And then we've already heard about home testing kits, those kinds of things. So these are realities that will exist for the people that live in our region, that will have access to these kinds of things. Beyond that, we know that there is life beyond COVID. What else this allows us to do is get engaged in other kinds of trials. Oncology, cardiothoracic surgery, hepatology, GI, and others are on the docket for us that will be in our community very soon. And we'll continue to certainly access the world-class research strength of Stanford Enterprise and bring that into our community. But what this will also allow us to do is begin our own trials, starting at ValleyCare to be disseminated elsewhere. So it's really an exciting time, despite the dynamism that it's produced for all of us. But it's changed the face of what is capable and available in the Tri-Valley almost overnight. And so we're really excited to be a part of that.
Well, that's very impressive work, and let us express our appreciation for the dedication of your entire team. And we're looking forward to more great news coming out of all that good work. So Dr. Seck, California has one of the country's most vibrant biopharmaceutical sectors with 3,766 life sciences companies who employ almost 324,000 people across the state, according to data by the California Life Sciences Association. We're very grateful to be joined by Boehringer Ingelheim today, as you are one of the companies that has a presence in the Congressman's district, as we heard earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about the company's work in the East Bay area and BI's efforts to develop therapeutics to combat coronavirus for patients in the community and also across the country?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be in this panel, and thank you for having me. With regards to the site that we have at Boehringer Ingelheim in Fremont, which is one of our sites, it's an important site for us, not only the US, it's an important site for us globally. We are a research-based company in the pharmaceutical company, but we are also one of the largest contract manufacturers of biopharmaceuticals in general. And in that context, Fremont plays a key role for us. Fremont, we bought the site in 2011, and I'm proud to say that it has grown ever since we bought it in 2011. We now have 800 employees. I will say this is a very diverse, employment base, and it's also a highly educated employee base, which is, I think, critical for an innovation-based company in general. We continue to invest in this site. We have invested over 500 million in upgrades over the last 9 years, and we continue to do so, and we have expanded the manufacturing capacity in this site quite substantially. With regards to COVID-19 treatments, as I said, we are a research-based company, and once the pandemic hit the world, really, that really motivated from the very high level in the organization, as well as everybody in the labs to contribute to find treatment options for COVID-19. Vaccines are really crucial, and that many panel members already mentioned that. And however, we believe that there's actually needs for patients who contract the infection even beyond vaccines. We have screened approximately 900,000 compounds in our internal library to find applications and potential antiviral effective investigational compounds. We have identified a number of them that we now are in the process of investigating further. Some of them are still in the preclinic, others actually have now made the way into clinical trials as well. So we have a focus on antivirals, but we are able to combine expertise that we have as a company. We are in the respiratory space for decades, over 60 to 80 years of experience in the respiratory space, as you might know. And we are also quite, firm with antibody development and manufacturing, as I said before. So what we are doing there is we're looking at neutralizing antibodies as well. We are looking at new pathways. And I think our expertise in respiratory disease allows us to evaluate potential inhaled delivery of neutralizing antibodies. And I think that's a very promising field that might actually help some patients with COVID-19, maybe even in the prevention area. So overall, there's a lot of effort around that. Also, BI was not previously researching in the virus area, but with COVID-19 and the suffering that it brought to the society and us personally globally, there was a huge effort behind it, and that continues today.
Well, thank you for all the innovative work that's going on at BI and for your continued commitment to moving the science forward. I'd like to go back to something the Congressman said earlier. Congressman, the scientific community warned us that we could face a strong resurgence of the virus as we head into this holiday season and the upcoming winter months. Already we're seeing communities across the country who are tightening some of the restrictions and imposing different types of lockdowns and other measures to try to ensure the safety of their populations. Can you share some thoughts on why innovative treatments might play a role and indeed perhaps be key to keeping local businesses and the economy open as we move forward?
Absolutely. And until we have a vaccine, the best thing we all can do, really is to wear a mask and distance ourselves. And, if we do that, that will go a long way in keeping the cases down. And if the cases are down, then the public health officer in Alameda County is not going to, take us in reverse when it comes to restaurants, which are allowed to be open with 25% indoor dining. We were one of the last counties in America that was able to do that. And I have worked with local restaurant owners on, trying to find ways that we can expand that safely and working with the county to make sure they understand that these restaurants will go under if we don't have, ways for them to do that. But you're right, investments in therapeutics, to reduce the overall hospitalization rates and death also will allow us to, see businesses remain open. But I want us to, have these businesses as open as soon as we can. I want the default for all of us to always be how quickly, can we open safely rather than, just, in the other direction. But that means, investing in the innovation in medicine, but also, what grants can we provide businesses with to sanitize the workplace, whether it's, tax credits for ventilation system improvements. We know when there's negative air pressure in the room, you can reduce the spread. And so on smaller structures, it is easier, to make those type of infrastructure improvements easier and less of a cost. And I know a restaurant, if it was going to receive a credit that could better ventilate the virus so that when someone sneezes or someone coughs, it immediately is lifted above, 8 feet in the air and isn't circulating around, they would make those investments. So I really think we have to look at this not just on the health side, but how do we have manageable and safe environments, hybrid indoor-outdoor environments, so people can still, enjoy themselves and businesses can thrive.
I think you make a great point about all of us having to work together and having a role in how we get past the current situation, and the fact that safety does have to come first. And certainly the ability to work remotely, as we're doing today, really points to the innovative communities in the technology sector who allow us to connect for events like this. But the truth of the matter is, I think many people expect and need to get back to working in an environment where they may interact more, with their customers or with their coworkers, and so we have to do that safely. So thank you for those thoughts. Mr. Freedman, you spoke earlier about Genentech's leadership in the industry to advance more inclusive research. And one of the other things the pandemic has really brought to light is how critical public-private partnerships are to addressing the many challenges we face. How can the biopharmaceutical community collaborate with actors across the healthcare industry to address the healthcare gap?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's actually quite critical that we all work together and collaborate to make health equity a reality, and that's across industry, academia, and government. And we've already been doing a lot of those activities with key partners as we plan forward to solving health equity issues in this country. But just to mention some of the partnerships, and so I can sort of illustrate how we're doing this. The first thing I wanted to mention is Rick from Stanford just mentioned about the Regeneron antibody cocktail, and that actually looks quite promising based on early results. And we actually are partnering with them at Roche to be able to manufacture those antibodies at scale. So that's an example of an industry partnership. We also are partnering with Atea to develop an oral antiviral. It will be the first oral antiviral out there potentially. So we're very excited about that. But those kind of partnerships are actually going to be quite critical. In terms of the private sector, I want to mention a couple of really exciting areas. So Roche is unique in that it has, in addition to a pharmaceutical business, it also has a large diagnostics business that I mentioned earlier, and it also has an insights business, which means we can have access to electronic medical record data, for example, in cancer patients. So we've been engaging in partnerships with large academic institutions and community-based oncology institutions, looking at how, at a population-based level, we can do diagnostic testing that can lead to molecularly guided treatment and then measure health outcomes and total cost of care, with the goal really of reducing healthcare costs in this country, but also improving health outcomes. And that also has an element to it of, it's personalized medicine, but it also, hopefully, if we can, do diagnostic screening across a broad population, it also is about, health equity and having a broader reach. And the last one I want to highlight is during COVID-19, we realized conducting clinical trials in the traditional way of patients going to the clinical sites frequently with intensive procedures is becoming very challenging. And so we've now piloted with the Veteran Affairs Health System, which is a very difficult system to penetrate, a large virtual decentralized clinical trial. And what that means is decentralized is that there's a single investigator that basically represents the entire VA healthcare system. So you don't have to go through the cumbersome contracting of each individual VA site. And the virtual aspect is designed to minimize patient exposure during COVID-19 and even beyond by using telemedicine, by doing remote digital monitoring, and also electronic consenting. And if we're successful with that, this will become a new platform for doing clinical trials because it does make patients safer. But the other aspect of it is there'll be more geographic diversity because patients who have to travel really long distances to the VA to be seen, who are in rural areas, probably will participate in the trial because it's all virtual. And also we will have access to minority populations that may not trust the healthcare system, but because it's virtual, they may have more trust. So we're trying to overcome those barriers as well.
Thank you for that. Dr. Seck, Mr. Freedman just spoke to the importance of public-private partnerships in addressing health disparities. Now, I know BI has also worked with actors across the health community throughout the global pandemic, whether it's academic institutions or groups like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Can you tell us a bit about BI's collaborative efforts and how this shaped the company's response to COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question, and in line with Jamie and others, I think partnerships, are really critical in this endeavor in general, but in particular when we need to move as quickly as in the COVID-19 situation. And BI certainly has a tradition of working with our external world, and that has continued with COVID-19, where we set up a number of really meaningful collaborations. Just to name a few, we are working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation specifically. BI is one of the 16 life science companies who have signed an agreement with the foundation to ensure distribution of vaccines and treatments regardless of cost. I think that's critical. We are also part of the therapeutic accelerator of this collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we leverage the work and our expertise around compounds in the antiviral space within that framework. Then we are working at another big collaboration, the CARE Consortium, which is part of the Innovative Medicine Initiatives, IMI, and it's based in the European Union. And we actually have contributed research and development resources quite substantially. We support 37 teams there in that collaboration. We have on the same table with academic institutions, nonprofit research organizations, other pharmaceutical companies, and we are specifically leading in this consortium the work stream that focuses on the development of neutralizing antibodies. I think, a little bit of a different collaboration that I think is really critical because we do recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic has does not only affect physical health, it also affects mental health. And we have a collaboration with the Collaboration Outcome Study on Health Functioning during the infection times, which is a big effort around better understanding internationally on a large scale how COVID impact actually both physical but also mental health. And we want to identify and help to identify patients at higher risk for either complication around COVID-19. So these are just three examples of, I think, unique collaborations that we have set up very quickly after the COVID-19 pandemic became reality.
Thank you for that, Dr. Seck. Mr. Shumway, you already mentioned the merger between Stanford Healthcare and Valley Care in 2015, bring you into a partnership with one of the country's leading academic health systems. Can you talk a bit more about the benefits of this affiliation with the university and the ways that has helped you deliver best-in-class medical care to patients in the Tri-Valley region?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's certainly been quite the journey, and it's an interesting context and construct to think about, partnership. In the end, we are Stanford now, and that transition has happened over the course of the last 5 years, and so much of what you think about when you think about Stanford now exists within our community, which is really, really exciting. I think it gets reflected in a lot of different ways when you think about these kinds of relationships between communities and large academic medical centers. There are a couple things that come to mind. I think one of the things that people immediately gravitate towards is what kind of an investment that organization has made into our community. And I can tell you that it is to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in our organization to support our community. That includes everything from infrastructure and ongoing major capital investments like getting our technology to be the latest and greatest so that we can take care of patients in the most effective way, to upgrading our electronic health records and our IT infrastructure so that we are one of the most digitally driven organizations around. So I think those sort of things are reflected in the relationship on an ongoing basis. So it's very exciting to be a part of that. It also means that we've been able to bring resources into our community to put us in a position where we can produce outcomes in a very different way than we had historically been able to do. That's reflected in many of the different things that we've seen out of Stanford Valley Care over the last year. We, as an example, were recognized by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services as a 5-star organization. That means that only 7% of organizations in the United States achieve that level of quality and accountability as recognized by the major government regulator. And so that's really an important part. Certainly you see that in our reflection as a Leapfrog A hospital health system. And then for the first time in the history of Valley Care, this year we were recognized by US News and World Report as the number 37 hospital health system in the state of California and number 7 in the Bay Area. And that includes all organizations. So I think that you see it reflected in the outcomes that we're able to produce. And then what we've been talking about today, we are part of cutting edge research that has been introduced into our community, and we'll continue to have that. The other thing that you see as a result of these kinds of relationships is the development of preeminent clinical programs that get established in our region. And the list is long for us. We now have Stanford cardiothoracic, vascular surgery, thoracic surgery, cardiology, oncology, stroke, neurovascular, orthopedics. I talked about GI and hepatology, and the list goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden, you don't have to go to Palo Alto anymore to get the same level of service that you can get in Pleasanton, which is really awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Freedman, I'm going to interrupt for a moment because I know the congressman is going to have to depart from the webinar in just a moment. So, Congressman, I'd just like to give you a chance for the last word. You know, we understand the important role that innovation plays, but you sit on the House Judiciary Committee, specifically on the courts and intellectual property and the Internet Subcommittee. Just really quickly before you leave us, can you tell us your thoughts about how effective IP policies have really helped sustain the research and development that's necessary to get through this crisis, and how it's helping the people in your district?
Certainly, Frank, giving businesses, the speed and agility, in intellectual property is important and has enabled, these therapies to reach the marketplace. And I think we also have to acknowledge, sadly, that because we have failed in many ways to, rise to the occasion and crush this virus through masking and distancing across the country, that you just get better the more cases that come your way. And I think that's a testament to our medical professionals. They certainly did not ask to have as many cases that have come into their hospitals, but they're also really incredibly well-trained and adaptable. And I think the fact that cases are going up, but we've seen the death rate not go up, in fact come down slightly. I think that's a testament to how hardworking and dedicated our healthcare professionals are to learning about the virus. And when you see hundreds of cases in your hospital, you're going to get better at reducing death. And I think Rick would probably agree. Some of this is therapeutics. Some of it is just the way that the person is prone and laying on the bed. They learn techniques that can reduce death. But going back to intellectual property, I really do believe one of the biggest challenges is going to be China and intellectual property theft, encountering what China continues to do across the globe in its economic espionage, in its lack of respect for intellectual property, and the efforts to take from U.S. businesses, especially on the research side, our ideas, and then stand those ideas up themselves, and then completely cripple a business's ability to get that therapy to the marketplace, because now it's cheaper and it's coming from China. That is pulverizing for our businesses. And I think the best way to take that on is not to fight China one-on-one, as we've seen in this administration's policy as it relates to trade, but rather to band together with other countries like Australia and Japan and South Korea and UK, who are victims of China's practices, and take them on that way, to use our strength in numbers to take them on. But that's one of my biggest concerns as it relates to intellectual property, is that we're at a disadvantage when one country does not respect what intellectual property means. But again, Frank, thank you. Thank you, Steve, for what you're doing locally. And thank you to Rick and Dr. Seck and Jamie for what you're doing in innovation. I'm heartened that in our district, we do have brilliant minds and able hands and big hearts that are trying to, do all we can to crush this virus. And I still believe that we can do that. We have an opportunity for a reset coming forward in January. And I look forward to working with all of you to make sure that we can.
Congressman, thank you for your time today. You've been very gracious and generous to join us. We really appreciate your insight. We look forward to continued partnership and working with you in support of your leadership in Congress on these issues. And I want to congratulate you on your reelection and look forward to working with you in the next session of Congress. So thank you and your staff for assisting with today's event. I'm going to ask the panelists to remain on, but again, thank you, Congressman, and look forward to continued discussion. I'd like to pose the same question, though, to our panelists, and this will just be open-ended to all three of the panelists, and whoever wants to jump in first, please can start. But can you share your thoughts about why strong IP policies are important, not only to the success of your company, but also to the ability to bring innovative new treatments and cures and potential vaccines to market, and why it's so critical that we maintain a strong intellectual property system to drive that innovation. So whoever'd like to jump in, I just open it up to the entire panel to perhaps close out on that question.
Sure, I can jump in first, Frank. I saw that question in the chat room as well. IP policy is absolutely critical for pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies, because it's really needed to be able to get the return on investment, ultimately, because that's what's used to fund future innovation. And without that, we would lose the ability to innovate. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be making the products affordable to all citizens, especially during a pandemic. And we should have special relief programs for underserved patients that can't afford a drug at all. So that's really, my view of it, and happy to hear other people's comments.
Yeah, maybe just to add to Jamie, not much to add. I think it's a critical, a critical incentive for innovation and to drive innovation, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, where the risk of failure is actually, way higher than the risk of the probability of success. When you have compounds that take 10 years to be developed in the clinic and years before, and when you start development in the clinic, only 5% make it in the end to the market, this is not a sustainable business if you don't have an incentive for the few that will make it to the market. So I think it's critical. That doesn't mean that access, as Jamie said, is not a critical, a critical piece, and BI is very much committed to make sure that innovation is actually accessible to patients, because in the end we serve patients, and if our treatments will not be available to them, that is not in our interest either. So it's a balance.
Rick, perhaps I can give you the last word.
Yeah, it's the benefit of going third. Everybody said all the good things, but the only thing I would add is quality and outcomes. So intellectual property is critical because the entirety of the development process, that knowledge base is important in terms of replicating success in the future. And so if the policies are not strong around supporting it, in addition to making sure that economically we can continue to reinvest in additional innovation, you also pose the risk of putting out there things that are not as quality controlled as they need to be, because that knowledge base isn't really as robust as it could be if it were managed a little differently. So anyway, I agree with both Dr. Seck and Jamie, but I think it's pretty critical.
So as the moderator, I'm going to have the prerogative of offering each of you the opportunity to either react to some of the responses you heard from your colleagues on the panel on any of the questions, or expand on any of those. And then lastly, is there something you wish I had asked you, or a point you'd really like to drive home that we have not discussed before we close out with the few minutes we have left?
So I'll start, and I'll answer both of those questions with one response. I really appreciated Dr. Seck and Jamie's comments around how industry is partnering across different domains. And I think that is how we are going to get through the pandemic. That is how we have gotten to the point that we are at right now. It has not been one entity, one sector, or otherwise that has allowed us to get to where we are today. And it won't be one entity and one sector that will allow us to close out the pandemic at whatever point that is. And so I think that the imperative is for all of us to continue that working together. And I'm proud to be part of the Tri-Valley because I believe that is ingrained in our DNA. And so I think that we need to continue to harness that and really make the best of it. So that's how I'd respond to both of your questions.
Dr. Seck, Mr. Freedman, either one?
Yeah, maybe I can combine it as well. I think that's a good strategy. I would say the following. I think this pandemic, as I said before, has brought an incredible suffering to people. I think that's on the forefront of everything. It has also had, and it continues to have, a major economic damage as well across the world, really, including us here in the US. But to end it on a positive note from my perspective, it also has really, shown what resilience we have as an organization, as a society, but also as an industry, to come together and regulators, FDA, government, really come together to come up with solutions and motivate things that we thought wouldn't be able to happen, right? I mean, who would have thought a year ago that we might be able to identify, test and manufacture a vaccine within the time frame we are looking at right now? That everybody would have said that's not possible. So the things that have been created in the last 8 to 10 months have been incredible and have been a real sign of what we are able to do if we work together and if we put the smartest people together.
Mr. Freedman?
Yes.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I guess I have the final word, so I have to come up with something slightly different. I want to thank the other panelists for their comments as well. Really appreciate it. I think, companies that work in this area are competitive with each other for the reasons we talked about around IP, but health equity is not an area that we should be competing in. It's an area that we should be banding together. And, now that we saw that we can actually execute on one of these inclusive research trials to get access to minority and underserved patients, I think we have to all work together to figure out how to do that more often. And also how do you engage in a better way with underserved and minority patients to be able to educate them about the benefits of the healthcare system. And we have to take a unified effort to doing that, because trust is at the core of why it's a barrier to getting patients access to clinical trials and even access to medicines that can help them. So I'm very optimistic, actually, that in the future, if there's a silver lining about the pandemic, in the future, we are going to start to address these problems that have been buried for many, many years and are now just being exposed. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you also for this return visit to the Chamber of Commerce. This is a really great platform, and I hope to come again. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. We sure appreciate that. I'm going to turn to my colleague with the Pleasanton Chamber and give Steve an opportunity to close us out before I make one or two final observations. But I first want to thank each member of the panel for your expertise, but also for your dedication to working through what is really a crisis for our entire country and the world. The leadership that the entire innovative sector has shown in terms of working collaboratively across companies and with government through public-private partnerships has been nothing short of inspiring. And also, I think to Dr. Seck's point, it has been really unique in this time, doing things in such a short time span and with such great collaboration has been a great example of how we should be responding to these types of critical situations. So with that, I want to thank Steve with the Pleasanton Chamber and give him the opportunity to perhaps provide some closing comments before just thanking everyone for joining us today. Steve?
Thank you, Frank. Thank you all for being here. And Rick, I want to especially thank you for joining us. Just so impressed with that number you threw out, $100 million of investment in the Tri-Valley. impressive. And it's so important that our businesses thrive and do well to create jobs and help our economies come back. And what you're doing, you know, we've seen so many negative comments lately about the increase in the spread. And I feel much better now hearing what you had to say today. So I appreciate that. And you guys you're a lot smarter than me. So I know we're going to get there. So thank you for all that you're doing. And I hope that we can talk again in the near future with some positive outcomes. Thank you so much, Frank.
Well, Steve, thank you for your leadership at the Pleasanton Chamber. Thank your entire team for supporting today's event and co-hosting with us. We look forward to continued collaboration and partnership. I also want to thank all those who took a moment from their busy schedules to join us for today's session. I know many folks provided some questions to us through the Zoom chat feature, and I'm sorry that because of timing, we're not able to get to your questions. I would like to encourage anyone who has questions to reach out directly to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Global Innovation Policy Center or to the Pleasanton Chamber, or indeed to Congressman Swalwell's team. I know he's got a great staff, and I'm sure that we'd all be happy to try to respond to questions you may have. So thank you again for taking time to be part of today's event. I think it was an excellent conversation. We look forward to doing more of these in the future. We know that it's going to take everyone working together to get through this crisis. We encourage you all to take the necessary steps to protect yourself and your families. We'll get through this together, but we have to be smart and we have to stay safe. So enjoy the holidays. Have a very happy Thanksgiving and holiday season. But please stay safe and please do what you need to do to take care of each other. So thank you all, and we appreciate your time. Look forward to doing another event soon.
Thank you.
You look nice.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciated that. I thought it went well, and I hope you were pleased.
Oh, I was very pleased. Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting discussion and learned a lot. So I hope we get there sooner than later. That's all I can say. Right.
I'm looking forward to coming out and playing some golf with you one day.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Maybe we'll catch a wave. Okay.
Yeah. I got to get those arms back in shape, but
yeah.
It's great chatting with you. Thanks so much for all your team did. Really appreciate the partnership and certainly look forward to talking again soon. Have great holidays. Okay.
Yeah. You too. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
You too.